you, Professor Finkelstein. And I don't know what to tell you, Dr. Finkelstein. You know it all. You know more than all of us about what's happening. The floor is open for you to share your take on what's happening. But I have one specific question that I want you to also comment on, which is the weaponization of anti-Semitism. Do you think that the allegation and accusation of anti-Semitism have been used in the last year to enable genocide, to enable war crimes? Can we at this point reach the conclusion that the anti-Semitism weaponization has made these accusations, these claims, as a tool for genocide, to enable genocide, to silence any criticism or anyone who speaks against genocide? But again, please, we need to hear everything you have to say about your take on the current situation. And thank you for being with us, Professor Finkelstein. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm going to try to cover some ground that's not been covered already, although I want to confirm that I agree with pretty much everything, not pretty much, well, we have pretty much everything that has been said. I want to just make some brief points and then turn to the question that you mentioned or you asked. The first point is that it was clear from day one, October 8th, that Israel had embarked on a genocide in Gaza. I said at the time that it was clear Israel's motive had changed from in the past. In the past, Israel's motive in Gaza had been, as it called it, I'm using Israel's language, it was mowing the lawn in Gaza. But after October 7th, Israel saw the crisis that occurred on October 7th as also an opportunity. That's a cliche, but cliches are often accurate. They saw the horror that occurred on October 7th was also an opportunity to, for once and for all, to solve the Gaza question, to once and for all liquidate the Gaza question. So they weren't going to mow the lawn in Gaza. They were going to extirpate, that means pull out by the roots. They were going to extirpate every blade of grass in Gaza, those 2.3 million people, of whom half are children. Now, if there were any doubt that Israel was embarking on a final solution to the Gaza question, the Israeli rhetoric from on high, from the very top, meaning the prime minister, the defense minister, the president of Israel, the rhetoric from the very top all the way down to the bottom and across the political spectrum, the rhetoric was, without any pretense, the rhetoric was genocidal. In fact, at this point, you can literally collect a full book volume, and it has been done. You can literally collect a full book volume, a hefty book volume of genocidal statements across the spectrum of Israeli society and at every level of Israeli society. In May 2024, the South Africans submitted to the Security Council a very hefty volume of statements by Israelis across the political spectrum, advocating the liquidation of the Gaza question. Lee Mordecai, a Princeton-trained historian, he put out his own compilation. And what was outstanding in his compilation is the large number of references he collected of simply postings, social media postings of genocidal statements and acts by Israelis in Gaza or about Gaza. It was very clear from day one when the prime minister said, "Remember Amalek," which, as has been repeatedly pointed out, both by Bet Selem, the Israeli Information Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories, and also in the recent Human Rights Watch, the recent Amnesty International report on the genocide in Gaza. They said it was perfectly obvious when the prime minister said, "Remember Amalek," that he was advocating a genocide against every man, woman, and child in Gaza. So you had the statement from the prime minister, you had the statement from the president of Israel, who said that there's no such a thing as civilians in Gaza. And then you have the order as issued by the defense minister Gallant was not to admit any food, water, fuel, or electricity into Gaza. So it doesn't require a rocket scientist or even a medical doctor to figure out that if you hermetically seal a tiny parcel of land and don't admit any food, water, fuel, or electricity, you have set out on a genocidal policy. Now, the fact is, within very narrow constraints imposed mostly by the US behind the scenes, apart from those minimal, marginal constraints, that policy of no food, fuel, water, or electricity has endured from the second week of October 2023 until today. So I do not believe there is any legitimate grounds for questioning whether or not Israel is carrying out a genocide in Gaza. Number two, I would say what happened in the past 14 months has exposed the complete bankruptcy of the international, not only political order, but the complete bankruptcy of the international legal order. The fact of the matter is that both that political and legal order had created the conditions, had laid the foundation for everything that happened after October 7th. First of all, was the international political and legal order that allowed for that inhuman and illegal blockade of Gaza, which caused October 7th. Number two, there have been so many UN reports of legal bodies documenting Israel's war crimes and crimes against humanity over the past 20 or more years. And never were any of those reports, which run literally to tens of thousands of pages of documentation. Yesterday, I finally decided to take to the incinerator room several tens of thousands of pages because they had simply cluttered my whole apartment. All this documentation, all of this evidence, all of this proof of Israel's commission of war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza, and none of it was ever acted upon. So what is the message that was being transmitted to Israel, except that they could literally get away with murder? And that message was, so to speak, taken to heart by the Israelis on October 8th, when they decided not only were they able to get away with murder, but they would take it to the next step and just finish off Gaza. Now, there's one other item I want to address. It was not just the inaction of the international political and legal community, it was the outright corruption in the legal and criminal sense. It's the current vice president of the International Court of Justice, Julie Sebutindi, who, in my opinion, and I don't say this flippantly or cavalierly, she's either being bribed or blackmailed by Israel. She is an agent of Israel on the International Court of Justice. There is the former chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Fatou Bensouda. She too, during her term of office, was transparently either being bribed or blackmailed by Israel. There is the special representative of the Secretary General, Gutierrez, Pramila Patten. Her report on the alleged rape that occurred on October 7th, for which, as of now, there is zero. I want your listeners to hear me, because I have a record of at least being accurate about the facts. There is zero material evidence that rape occurred on October 7th. There is no forensic evidence. There is no digital evidence. There is no medical evidence. There is zero evidence. And Pramila Patten, that special representative of the Secretary General, promoted the lie of rape on October 7th and facilitated the genocide in Gaza. There is that moral monster, you hear me? Moral monster, Sheryl Sandberg, the former chief operating officer of Meta, who put out this filthy film called Screams Before Lies, which was then not premiered, but shown at the Biden White House, also promoting the lie of rapes on October 7th, for which, as of now, I repeat, there is no material evidence. There is the former president of the ICJ, Joan Donoghue, the American representative on the court, who lied in April 2024 when she said on BBC television, the program Hard Talk, she said that the ICJ had not found that Israel was plausibly committing genocide. That was a flat out lie, a careerist, opportunist lie. Now, I could go on and on and on, but these people need finally to be called out. They're being bribed, they're being blackmailed by Israel, or they're just the most debased, depraved opportunists and careerists. In the case of Sheryl Sandberg, the billionaire former chief operating officer, she is just a Jewish supremacist. She sees it as her personal calling and responsibility to defend Israel's right to commit genocide. And that, I'm afraid, is exactly what they believe, that Israel, Jews, have the right to commit genocide. That's their mindset. They are Jewish supremacists. Ms. Medea Benjamin, she mentioned a moment ago, the assault on our colleges and universities. But who led the assault? It was Jewish supremacist billionaires like Bill Ackman, like Barry Sternlicht, like Robert Kraft, Ackman at Harvard, Sternlicht at Brown, Kraft at Columbia, who blackmailed, who held hostage our universities, our premier universities, and told them, unless you crush the student protests against genocide, we are going to withhold our hundreds of millions of dollars in alumni donations. These people need to be called out. They need to be held accountable. We shouldn't just use broad terms like the international political order, the international legal system. There are individuals who are personally, criminally, and morally guilty of facilitating the genocide of a people who have been held hostage in a concentration camp. By the way, if you go back and look at the historical record, already in the 1950s, when Gaza was under Egyptian administration, all the way back from the 1950s, and you go forward, straight forward. I don't have the time now to document it. If you go from the 50s forward, the Egyptian administration, the Israeli administration, the same term keeps coming up in the observations of all outsiders. Over and over and over again, it said Gaza is a concentration camp. Gaza is a concentration camp. It's the recurring description of that place. And now, in the last stage, the concentration camp has been converted into a death camp. That's the facts. And these individuals, the Judge Sebutindi, the Fatou Bensouda, the Pramila Patten, the Sheryl Sandberg, all of them have facilitated and abetted this horror that's occurred over the past, it's really not only the past 14 months, but now we're at the final stage of it. And they pretend that they're doing this in solidarity with Jews against, fighting anti-Semitism. They use the anti-Semitism in order to abet and facilitate the genocide. Because at heart, at the bottom, the others, the Sebutindis, the Bensoudas, the Pramila Pattens, they're just crooks and the Donahues. They're crooks and careerists. Crooks and careerists. You're run-of-the-mill crook and you're run-of-the-mill careerist. But when it comes to the Sheryl Sandbergs, the Bill Ackmans, the Barry Sternlichs, the Robert Krafts, and on and on and on, they're just Jewish supremacists who hide behind their Jewishness in order to facilitate and abet the genocide.